You've probably heard the stories. The ones about houses that seem alive, that don't want to be forgotten. The ones where people disappear, only to be replaced by strange whispers in the night. They say you can feel the presence of something watching you, lurking just beyond the corners of your vision. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about one such house. A house that no one dares to talk about anymore, except in hushed tones. It had been years since Clara moved to the quiet little town, a place where everything seemed calm on the surface. But there was something about this town, a sense that not all was as it seemed. And the old house at the edge of town, well, it was the crown jewel of that eerie atmosphere. One evening, with a crisp breeze biting at her cheeks, Clara found herself walking past the house once again. She had heard the rumors, of course. People whispered about it when they thought no one was listening. They said it was abandoned, that it had been empty for decades. Yet every time Clara passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was inside waiting. The house was dark and quiet, almost too quiet. As Clara walked past the iron gate, the wind picked up, making the branches of the trees sway and creak. The kind of creaking that sounded like someone whispering. And then, as if pushed by an invisible hand, the gate groaned open just a crack. She froze. No one had touched it. She was sure of that. So why was it open now? Against every instinct urging her to turn around, Clara stepped closer to the door. The moment her fingers brushed the cold iron, she felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She couldn't help herself. Curiosity, the kind that could only be described as dangerous, tugged her forward. As she pushed the gate open wider, a strange feeling swept over her. The air smelled different here, old, damp, like something had been locked away for too long. But still, something called to her from inside. A low, familiar whisper. Clara. The voice was faint, like a memory trying to claw its way to the surface. Clara stood motionless for a moment, her heart racing. It couldn't be. She hadn't heard that voice before, at least not in years. She hesitated, but the pull of the voice was too strong to ignore. She had to know. With a slow, deliberate step, she crossed the threshold. The house greeted her with an unsettling silence, as if it were holding its breath. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper. The once grand staircase, now covered in layers of dust. But it was the air that was the strangest, the cold, almost oppressive chill that seemed to seep from the very foundation of the house. Then, there it was again, a soft, lingering whisper, as though someone was right behind her. "Come closer, Clara." Her skin prickled. Was it her imagination, or did the shadows in the corners shift? She spun around, expecting to see something, but the hall was empty. Only the faint creaking of the house, as it settled, echoed in her ears. Clara's breath quickened as she pressed forward, drawn deeper into the house. Each step was like stepping into another world, one where time had stopped. The air was thick with secrets. And then, from deep within the walls, came the sound that made her blood run cold, a soft, scratching noise. It started as a low, distant sound, but soon it grew louder, sharper, like something clawing its way through the walls. "Help us."
The words came in a voice that wasn't quite human. It was hollow and desperate. Clara stopped dead in her tracks, her pulse pounding in her ears. She wanted to run, but her feet remained rooted to the floor. The house had her now. There was no escape from its pull. The walls seemed to be alive, as if they were breathing, slow, deliberate inhales and exhales that made the air around her feel thicker, heavier. She could hear the whispers more clearly now, coming from all directions, as though 1,000 voices were speaking in unison. "Leave while you still can." Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she stumbled back, eyes wide, searching the shadows for any sign of movement. But it was a mirror that caught her attention. At the end of the hall stood a room, its door slightly ajar. The faintest flicker of light glowed from within, and without thinking, Clara approached. She pushed the door open with a creak, and the room beyond seemed to exhale a long, drawn-out sigh of relief. It was filled with old furniture, long forgotten and covered in dust. But at the center of the room stood an antique mirror, its surface cracked, the edges jagged like shattered glass. As Clara stepped closer, she caught her reflection. But it wasn't just her. Behind her, in the mirror, stood a shadow. Tall, thin, and featureless except for the eyes. Those eyes, dark, empty, and unblinking. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she turned around, but the room was empty. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears as she reached out for the mirror. The moment her hand brushed the cold glass, the shadow and the reflection moved. Slowly, deliberately, it raised its hand, mirroring hers. "Leave now." The voice was louder now, more urgent, like it was coming from the mirror itself. Clara stumbled back, the world spinning as the whispers grew into frantic cries, a chorus of voices that filled the room. She tried to tear her eyes away, but she couldn't. The reflection, it wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was something else, something ancient, trapped behind the glass, reaching for her, waiting to pull her in. And then everything went quiet. Clara blinked, trying to shake the dizziness. But when her eyes opened again, she realized the house was no longer empty. She wasn't alone. The room had filled with figures, pale, gaunt, and staring. Faces from the past, their eyes hollow, their mouths frozen in silent screams. The air grew thick, suffocating, and Clara felt her chest tighten as the whispers returned. "You shouldn't have come." And in that moment, she understood. The house didn't just want to keep its secrets. It wanted her, just like it had wanted everyone else before her. As the door slammed shut, the last whisper she heard was the same one that had lured her in. "Welcome."